Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights. As you all know, we're carrying on our series with regards to Ghulu and Ghulat in the history of Tashayyu'. Today we're going to be discussing how the Imams combated the Ghulat and ensured that they kept their Shi'a safe from their influence. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So we want to start off first of all with the basic principle of the religion. First of all, we all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects his religion, and it is his responsibility to protect the religion. We've all heard the stories of the seerah, we've all heard the ayat of the Quran that explain this fundamental principle that Allah protects his religion. If we take a look at an ayah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hijr, ayah number 9 after the Basmala, what does Allah say? Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. Indeed, it is us that have sent down the remembrance, and it is us that will protect it. So that's the principle that Allah has set down, that He will protect His religion Himself. He will protect His remembrance Himself. He will protect His Quran Himself. So we see that Allah takes the responsibility here. Allah gives this responsibility, and He fulfills this responsibility through the Imams of al-Bayt alayhi salam. And that's why we see in Ziyad Jami'at al-Kabira that we address the Imams as the protectors of the religion. What do we say? We say, Assalamu ala al-imat al-du'at wal-qadat al-hudat wal-sadat al-wulat wal-dhadat al-humat. We say, may salutations and salam be upon the Imams, who are what? Who are the callers to the religion, the leaders, the guides, the honorable ones, the ones who are in charge, and those who protect the religion, al-humat, wa ahl al-dhikri, wa ul al-amri, wa baqiyat Allahi wa khiratih. That they are the people of remembrance. They are the people that keep this remembrance alive, that the Quran mentioned there, with regards to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the hujjaj of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the protectors of His religion. So we know that the Imams have a responsibility, and they fulfill the responsibility of protecting the religion from all sorts of misguidance, all sorts of deviances, and all sorts of misguided groups in all spaces and in all times. And we know that even today, that there are those from the Shi'a that are receiving guidance from the Imam of our time, alayhi salatu wasalam. One of the things that the Imams are responsible for protecting the religion from is the Ghulat. And as we mentioned last week, the Ghulat were groups that existed at their time, and they were infiltrating the religion at the time of the Imams, alayhim salam. So the Imams also had a responsibility towards them. We see in a narration in Al-Kafi from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. What does he say? He says, Inna al-ulama warathatul anbiya. He says that the scholars are the inheritors of the religion. وَذَاكَ أَنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُورِثُوا دِرْهَمًا وَلَا دِينَارًا وَإِنَّمَا أَوْرَثُوا أَحَادِيثَ مِنْ أَحَادِيثِهِمْ. He says that is that the prophets do not leave behind, or they do not leave inheritance of dirham wala dananir, that they don't leave money behind. What they leave behind is the ahadith, the religion, the understanding of the religion. فَمَنْ أَخَذَ بِشَيْءٍ مِنْهَا فَقَدْ أَخَذَ حَظًّا وَافِرًا فَانْظُرُوا إِلْمَكُمْ هَذَا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَهُ. So he's saying, make sure that you know who you're taking your religion from for this reason. فَإِنَّ فِينَا أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ فِي كُلَّ خَلَفٍ عُدُولًا لَا يَنْفُونَ عَنْهُ تَحْرِيفَ الْغَالِينَ وَانْتِحَالَ الْمُبْطِلِينَ وَتَعْوِيلَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. He says, from us Ahlul Bayt, indeed there's always an individual in every time and place that he is upright, and he takes away the tahrif of the ghalin, the people that are exaggerators, the ghulat. They take away their exaggeration. They make sure that they protect the religion from that misguidance. And the imposters, from the people that want to take away things from the religion, and the ta'wil of the jahilin, the false interpretations of those people who are ignorant of the religion. So the Imams make it clear here that it is their responsibility on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as per the ayat of the Quran, to make sure that they protect their religion. They protect the religion of Islam from these ghulat. And that takes us on to our discussion today of how did the ghulat try to infiltrate the religion of Islam, the religion of Tashayyu', the religion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and how did the Imams combat this and ensure that they were not able to have the influence that they wanted. So today we're going to discuss this in 3 points. Number one, how did the Ghulat try to infiltrate Shi'a Hadith? Number two, how did the Imams make sure that they were able to keep the Ghulat influence outside of the Shia Hadith? And number three, how did the Hadith actually reach us as their Shia, for example, 1,000 years later? So in order to begin this discussion, we want to look into some Hadith in Rijal al-Kashi, which is the book that we read from last week as well. What do we see that the Ghulat used to do? We have a narration here from Hisham bin Hakam. He says that I heard Imam Sadiq alayhi salam say أنه سمع أبا عبد الله يقول كان المغيرة بن سعيد يتأمد الكذب على أبي. He says that Imam Sadiq said that Mughira ibn Sa'id, he used to lie upon my father. He's talking about Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Then what did they used to do with these books? يأخذون الكتب من أصحاب أبي فيدفعونها إلى المغيرة فكان يدس فيها الكفر وزندقة ويسندها إلى أبي. So he says that this is what they used to do. They used to take the books, they used to give it to Mughira, and Mughira would add into it narrations of kufr and zandaqa, of disbelief and heresy. What did these narrations say? These are the narrations that say the Imams are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the ones that say that the Sharia has been abrogated. You don't need to pray, you don't need to fast. Those are the things that we spoke about last week, the characteristics of the Ghulat. So then he used to take these and he used to attribute it to Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. فَيَأْمُرُهُمْ أَنْ يَثْبِتُوهَا فِي الشِّيعَةِ. He used to give it to his companions, and then he used to make sure that it would become infiltrated within the Shia. And then the Imam says, فَكُلُّ مَا كَانَ فِي كُتُبْ أَصْحَابِ أَبِي مِنَ الْغُلُو فَذَاكَ مِمَّا دَسَّهُ الْمُغِيرَةُ بْنُ سَعِيدٍ فِي كُتُبِهِمْ. He says that everything that was from Ghulu in the books of the companions of my father, then it was added by this individual, this cursed individual. His name was Mughira ibn Sa'id. He was one of the Ghulat, and he used to add these narrations into their books. So this was the way in which the Ghulat used to try and infiltrate the books of the Shia. They did this to make sure that the Shia get misguided. They get moved towards the beliefs of the Ghulat, so that the Ghulat would be able to gain power, to be able to gain respect in the community and become leaders of the Shia themselves, making their own cults, as we discussed last week. So we read that at the time of Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq. We also have at the time of Imam Rida, same thing. We have a narration, I'm reading from Bihar al-Anwar here. But this narration originally is from Uyun Akhbar al-Rida. And the last narration we read it from Rijal al-Kashi. These are all from our classical books. That's where I'm trying to make sure that everything that we return to today, or we refer to, is from our classical books. So we have this hadith from Imam Rida. He's speaking to Ibn Abi Mahmud. What does he say? He says, إن مخالفين وضعوا أخبارا في فضائلنا وجعلوها على أقسام ثلاثة. He says that people from our enemies, the ones that oppose us, they added narrations into our books with regards to our merits, and they made them upon three categories. He says, أحدها الغلو. The first one is غلو. وثانيها التقصير في أمرنا. And the second one is taking away, actually downplaying, the understanding and the merits of the Imams. وثالثها التصريح بمثالب أعدائنا. And the third one is mentioning our opponents and our enemies by their names. And we mentioned this in our previous episodes of Jum'ah nights, where we spoke about open Bara'ah and the Imams and how they explained these concepts to the Shia. But obviously that is not for our discussion today. What does the Imam Rida say? Imam Rida says, فَإِذَا سَمِعَ النَّاسَ الْغُلُوُ فِينَا كَفَّرُوا شِيعَتَنَا. He says that if the people were to hear that these narrations of ghulu with regards to us Ahlul Bayt, then they would call our Shia disbelievers. So what's Imam saying here? He's saying that these narrations actually harm our Shia themselves, inside our Shia, and also it harms us from an external perspective as well, because the external people that were to see these narrations would say that the Shia are disbelievers. So the Ghulat here are actually causing a huge issue with regards to trying to put these narrations into the books of the companions of the Imams alayhi salam. And then he says, وَنَسَبُوهُمْ إِلَى الْقَوْلِ بِرُبُوبِيَتِنَا. That they would claim that the Shia are those who claim that their Imams are divine, that their Imams are actually God. And this is the problem that the Imam had. These are the narrations that were being added into their books. Okay? These are the narrations that were being added into the books. The ones saying that the Imams were Allah and that the Sharia is abrogated. These are the narrations that were added into the books. Okay? So this is what Imam Rida is saying. He's also saying, you know what, this is a big issue. The Ghulat are actually trying to infiltrate our books, and this is the problems that they will cause if they are successful. So if this was the great danger that the Shia faced, how did the Imams actually combat this? And that's what we want to get into now. In order to explore this, we want to look at an ayah of the Quran in Surah Bayyinah. What does Allah say? Allah says in Surah Bayyinah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Rasulun min Allahi yatlu suhufan mutahhara, fiha kutubun qayyima. He says that a messenger from Allah that reads, that recites papers that are pure. Fiha kutubun qayyima. That in them there are books that are upright books. Right? So here we see that there is a level of divine protection of scripture. That they are purified. Yeah? And they are upright books that have to be left behind by the Rasul, by the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, by the teachers of the religion. They need to leave behind upright books in order for the Muslims to be able to refer to. Here it mentions kutub, it mentions multiple books. Of course, the first of those books and the first thing that would come into the minds of every Muslim is the Quran. The Quran is the first preserved and protected book that needs to be able to be relied upon by the Muslims in order for them to find truth. But which are these other books that it mentions? Because it's in plural, it's not saying one book as we see in other parts of the Quran. Here it's saying that there are multiple books. Which books are these? We see in the Hadith of the Imams. What do they say? We have a Hadith in Basair al-Darajat. In Basair al-Darajat we have a narration from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam with regards to this ayah of the Quran. It's narrated by Burayd al-Ajli. What does he say? He says, سألت أبا جعفر عن قول الله تعالى في صحف مطهرة فيها كتب قيمة. With regards to the ayah that I mentioned earlier, these papers that are purified and these books that are held upright. The Imam says, هو حديثنا في صحف مطهرة من الكذب. The Imam says, there are books of ahadith. These are the papers of purification. These are the ones that are purified from lies. That's what the Imam says in the narration. You can see here that the Quran and the ahadith, all of them have some level of divine protection in order that the Shia will be able to refer back to these books in order to find truth. So this is what the Imam is saying. Yeah, he's saying that they are mutahhara min al-kadhib. They are purified from lies. So it doesn't make sense then for the ahadith books that reached us from the Imams alayhim salam to be ones that are riddled with confusion and ghulu. Ones that have kufr and zandaqa in them. Absolutely not. Even the reality shows us that that is not the case. When we mentioned earlier about the books of Imam al-Rida, where he said that the people will call us gods, or we saw in the narration where Imam Sadiq says that Mughira bin Sa'id used to put in them the hadith of kufr and zandaqa. These narrations don't even exist on the reality, on the ground. If we were to look through our books of ahadith, our classical books of ahadith, we don't have these narrations anymore. So we can see that those narrations were not an issue. They're not an issue for us now. Those are things that have been dealt with. How did the Imams deal with them is the question. The Imams did this through three things. Number one, distancing the Shi'a from the Ghulat. Number two, having a culture of assessing the narrations and removing that which was misguidance. And number three, teaching their companions the principles to be able to ascertain that themselves when they are narrating a hadith and collecting a hadith. As for distancing the Shia from the Ghulat, we saw last week in the narration of Imam Sadiq that he cursed Abu al-Khattab, he cursed his followers, the ones that died with him, and anybody that felt sorry for them in that they were being killed. So the Imam, what was he doing? He was distancing his Shia. He was making sure that the Shia don't even try to go near the Ghulat. Yeah, so this is an important thing. And each Imam, after Imam done that, you see that all the way up to the last Imam, our Imam, the Imam of our time, alayhi salatu wasalam. What do we see? This is how important staying away from the Ghulat was. We see in a tawqi from Imam al-Mahdi, Imam Sahib al-Zaman, what does he say? He mentions in the tawqi of Ishaq ibn Yaqub, he mentions with regards to Abu al-Khattab. Imagine Imam Sahib al-Zaman. This is years and years and years after Abu al-Khattab. Abu al-Khattab died in the time of Imam al-Sadiq. Yeah, and Imam Mahdi is still speaking about him. What does he say? He says, وَأَمَّا أَبُو الْخَطَّابِ مُحَمَّدِ بن أبي زينب الأجدع فملعون وأصحابه ملعونون فلا تجالس أهل مقالتهم فإني منهم بريء وآبائي منهم براء. So he says that as for Abu al-Khattab, Muhammad ibn Abi Zaynab al-Ajda, that's his name, for he is cursed, his companions are cursed. So do not sit with those people that have the same opinions even as them. So for example, in times that were to come, if you were to see people with the beliefs that the Sharia is abrogated, you were to see people with the beliefs that the Imams are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wal-a'adhu billah, these are people that need to be completely, basically boycotted. You need to not sit with them even. Yeah, فَإِنِّي مِنْهُمْ بَرِيء, I am completely disassociated from them. وَآبَائِ مِنْهُمْ بُرَاء, and my grandfathers and my fathers, my forefathers are all disassociated from them as well. They're free from them. So you can see that throughout the times of the Imams, that the Imams would order their Shia to be distanced from the Ghulat, making sure that the Shia didn't even sit with the Ghulat. If you sit with them, then you give them a chance to infiltrate you. Yeah, you need to boycott Ghulat. Ghulat are not a joke. Yeah, this is orders from the Imam of our time, that when you see people of this persuasion, completely just don't even sit with them. Don't even try to discuss with them. Try to do anything like that. Just stay away completely. The second thing that the Imams would do to keep us away from the influence of the Ghulat is they had a culture of making sure that the narrations that were in the books of the Shia were constantly assessed. That the companions, either they would assess them themselves or they would take them to the Imams for them to be assessed. So where do we see this? We see this in all of the times of the Imams. We have a narration here with regards to Abu Hamza al-Thumali. Abu Hamza al-Thumali is a very famous companion. Most of us, we read his dua in Shahr Ramadan, in the last 10 nights. What does he say? He says, ما سمعت بأحد من الناس كان أزهد من علي بن الحسين إلا ما بلغني من علي بن أبي طالب. What does he say? He says, I never knew of someone that had more zuhd than Imam Sajjad, Imam Ali, Zayn al-Abidin, except that which has reached me with regards to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Abu Hamza al-Thumali says, قال أبو حمزة كان الإمام علي بن الحسين إذا تكلم في الزهد ووعظ أبكى من بحضرته. That when he used to speak about zuhd, people around him used to be reduced to tears. قال أبو Hamza, this is the point of the narration that I wanted to look at. He says, وقرأت صحيفة فيها كلام زهد من كلام علي بن الحسين وكتبت ما فيها ثم أتيت علي بن الحسين فأردت ما فيها عليه. He says that I read a sahifa, I read a scroll. In it was words with regards to zuhd from the words of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. So I wrote it down. Look at Abu Hamza al-Thumali. What does he do? He wrote it down. وكتبت ما فيها ثم أتيت علي بن الحسين فأردت ما فيها عليه. So he said that I wrote it down and then I took it to Imam Sajjad to show him, to ask him, is all of this correct? What do you think of this which has been written? فَأَرَفَهُ وَصَحَحَهُ. So he took it, he knew that which was from his words, and he said that this is all correct basically. So the companions, they had a culture of actually taking narrations and that which was attributed to the Imams themselves to confirm and affirm. Yeah, so this is at the time of who? Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Then we see with regards to the Imams that came after, the same thing. We see this at the time of the later Imams, Imam al-Jawad and Imam al-Askari. What do we see? We see here a narration from Ahmad ibn Abi Khalaf from Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. He says, the companion narrates, he says, كنت مريضا فدخل علي أبو جعفر يعودني عند مرضي. So he says, I was ill, I was in a state of sickness, and the Imam al-Jawad came towards me to visit me during my illness. And by my head there was a book, the book of the day and night. This is the book of Hadith, of the Imams that came prior. فجعل يتصفحه ورقة ورقة حتى أتى عليه من أوله إلى آخره وجعل يقول رحم الله يونس رحم الله يونس رحم الله يونس. The Imam took this book. فجعل يتصفحه ورقة ورقة. He went through that book page by page, page by page. And then he went back, he went from the beginning to the end. And then what did he say? He started to say, Rahimullah Yunus, Rahimullah Yunus. May Allah's mercy be upon Yunus. This is speaking about Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. He was the one that compiled this book. So the Imams here, they would go through a book, a whole book, and they would be like, yeah, all of these narrations are sahih. They would look through the books of the ahadith that were compiled. You see, the Imam comes here, he's come to visit one of his 6 Shia. He's still on his mind is, okay, cool, let me have a look through this book. Let me see if there's anything incorrect in it. The same thing with the Imams that came after. We have with regards to Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. Yeah, we have a narration from Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari. He says, أدخلت كتاب يوم وليلة الذي ألفه يونس بن عبد الرحمن على أبي الحسن العسكري فنظر فيه وتصفحه كله ثم قال هذا ديني ودين آبائي وهو الحق كله. He took it to the Imam al-Askari, the same book, the book of Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. He looked in it and he looked at every single page. Then he said, this is my religion and the religion of my forefathers, and all of what is within it is true, is haqq, is from us, is from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So we see this culture of the Imams. They would actually make it a thing that their companions would come to them. They would give them these narrations. They would say, is this correct? And the Imams would say, this is correct. Or the Imams themselves, they would go and they would see these books and they would take out that which is incorrect and confirm that which was correct. And they used to make sure, we saw from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, that he told his companions, look, this is what Mughira ibn Sa'id used to bring upon my father. You guys need to be aware. This is what was happening in the hadith of my father. This is what you guys need to remove from our corpus as Shi'a. These are not the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So the Imams basically played direct roles in making sure that the narrations of Ghulu didn't come into their books. And they used to actually teach their companions these principles in order for them to make sure that they didn't narrate that which was not from the Imams alayhi salam as well. We see in a narration here in Rijal al-Kashi also. We have a narration with regards to Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. Yeah, that they asked him, they said, Ya Aba Muhammad, ma ashadaka fil hadith, wa akthar inkaraka lima yarwihi ashabana. They're asking Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, what's made you so harsh in your assessment of narrations and saying no and rejecting a lot of the narrations that are narrated from our companions? He says, حدثني هشام بن حكم أنه سمع أبا عبد الله عليه السلام يقول. He says that I heard Hisham bin Hakam tell me that Imam al-Sadiq عليه السلام said لا تقبلوا علينا حديثا إلا ما وافق القرآن والسنة أو تجدون معه شاهدا من أحاديثنا المتقدمة فإن المغيرة بن سعيد لعنه الله دس في كتب أصحاب أبي أحاديث لم يحدث بها أبي. He says that Imam Sadiq said, do not accept upon us a hadith except that which agrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, or that which you find a corroborating evidence from our previous ahadith. Because Mughira ibn Sa'id actually added a lot of narrations into the books of the companions of my father that my father never said. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تَقْبُلُوا عَلَيْنَا ما خالف قول ربنا تعالى وسنة نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. He says that don't accept any hadith from us that goes against either the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we see here that the Imams are giving clear principles to the companions, for people like Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman and Hisham bin Hakam, the high ranking ones from their companions, to make sure that they decipher these narrations themselves and make sure that the narrations of the Ghulat do not reach the Shi'a corpus. Then what do we see Yunus say? Yunus said, I went to Iraq and I saw a group of people from the companions of Imam al-Baqir and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and they had their books. فَسَمِعْتُ مِنْهُمْ وَأَخَذْتُ كُتُبُهُمْ فَأَرَثْتُهَا مِنْ بَعْدِ عَلَى أَبِي الْحَسَنِ الرِّضَى. So he took some of these books from them. Again, you see, this is the culture of taking these books of narrations and taking them to the Imams. He took it to Imam al-Ridha. What does Imam al-Ridha say? He says, فأنكر منها أحاديث كثيرة أن يكون من أحاديث أبي عبد الله عليه السلام وقال لي إن أبا الخطاب كذب على أبي عبد الله لعن الله أبا خطاب. He says that he rejected a lot of the narrations that were in these books from the books that he picked up from Iraq and he took towards Imam al-Ridha. And what did he say? He says that Abu al-Khattab used to lie upon Imam al-Sadiq a lot. May Allah's curse be upon Abu al-Khattab. وكذلك أصحاب أبي الخطاب يدسون هذه الأحاديث إلى يومنا هذا في كتب أصحاب أبي عبد الله. He says that, and to this day, the companions of Abu al-Khattab, they're adding into the books of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. فلا تقبلوا علينا خلاف القرآن. Do not accept those hadith upon us that are against the Quran. فإن إن حدثنا بموافقة القرآن وموافقة السنة. He says, إن عن الله وعن رسوله نحدث ولا نقول قال فلان وفلان. We only narrate that which Allah said, what the Rasul said, and we do not say so and so said and so and so said, such that our claims and our sayings would become contradicting, that the first of us would contradict the last of us. That is not possible. Every word or every saying that comes from us is corroboration with the ones that came before, the Imams that came before. So he says that if someone comes to you with with a hadith that is against what I have just told you, then give it back to him. وَقُولُوا أَنْتَ أَعْلَمُ وَمَا جِئْتَ بِهِ. He say to them that they are more knowing of that which they have come to them with. فإن مع كل قول منا حقيقة وعليه نورا فما لا حقيقة معه ولا نور عليه فذلك قول الشيطان. He says that everything that we say has upon it a reality on the ground, وعليه نورا, and it has a light upon it. Inherently, that which we say has value in the very things that we say. And that which has no inherent realistic value, and it doesn't have that light upon it, it doesn't have nur upon it, it doesn't have inherent value, then that is from the sayings of shaitan. It's not from our sayings. It's not from the sayings of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So what do we see from this lengthy narration that I've just read? We see a number of points mentioned here. We see here that the Imams already pinpointed those who were adding into their narrations, who were lying upon them. So they would not leave these ahadith in their books. Is it possible that Mughira bin Sa'id would lie upon Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq would just leave those ahadith in the books of the Shia? Does that make sense? Is that a logical thing for it to happen? No. Imam al-Sadiq wouldn't just sit there and say Mughira bin Sa'id lied upon my father. He would actually go through the books and he would remove these ahadith. Right? So this is something that we see. So Imam Rida here would do the same thing. He would take out the narrations that are to do with ghulu, and he would take them out of the books in accordance with Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, and Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman will be able to take these books and take them back, clean of ghulu and clean of the narrations of the ghulat. Then we see that the companions themselves would actually decipher these themselves. That Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman had these principles ready in order that when he receives the hadith, he already knows what he's narrating and what he isn't, because he would already be able to assess them according to the principles that the Ahlul Bayt gave him already. And he was a scholar from the companions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So he was able to assess these narrations himself. We see the Imams give direct principles with regards to assessing these ahadith. They say comparison to the Quran and comparison to the known ahadith of Rasulullah. So we see here that the Imams give a complete infrastructure. They give a complete system of how to assess the ahadith against the Quran and against the ahadith that are known. So this is what Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman used to do. This is what the companions used to do. Even if the Imams were not able to get to a certain book, do you think that Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman and Hisham bin Hakam and these companions would leave these ahadith in the books of the Shia? No way. These people were on it. These people were on next levels. They used to follow these principles, these key principles. They used to build a picture, first of all, with the Quran, with the tafsir of the Ahlul Bayt, the known ahadith of the Imams. And according to that picture, in accordance to that picture, they would have these ahadith that would come to them and they would judge it by its symmetrical value to that system that has been made. Yeah, of the Quran, of the ahadith, of the tafsir of the Imams alayhi salam. Because the Quran needs to be understood by the tafsir of the Imams, right? Once you have understood that and you've built that picture, any hadith that comes to you, you would be able to judge it using the symmetrical value. This is what the Imams say. When they say, compare our hadith to the Quran, it is not as you see people doing it now. They say, oh, you look, they open the ayah of the Quran and they look at it in the full walls of the ayah. No context to the ayah, no tafsir to the ayah, no understanding from the Ahlul Bayt with regards to the ayah. And then they say, look, this hadith goes against this ayah. No, that's not how it's meant to be done. It's meant to be done by looking at the ayah of the Quran, by its context, by the tafsir of the Imams, by the qira'at of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Once you have understood what the ayah means, in accordance to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, the rasikhuna fil ilm, the ones who give you teaching of the Quran, then you are able to compare these ahadith that come to you that are new to this overall picture. And that's the symmetrical value and the principles that the Imams taught their companions in order to get rid of these ahadith of ghulu in their books. So what after this? After these companions had gone through all this hard work, the Imams had gone through all of this hard work to ensure that our books were cleaned from the narrations of the ghulat, how did the narrations then reach us after? What do we see? We see in the tradition of the Shia, the tradition of hadith in the Shi'i tradition is completely different to what we see in the opposing sects. We have a tradition of writing down a hadith. While we see that the oral transmissions obviously existed also, but we had a large quantity of ahadith that were written down. And these ahadith used to be compiled into these usul, these scrolls or books of companions where they would compile their ahadith. And these usul, from the times of Imam al-Baqir, Imam Sadiq, they were kept. These companions, they would have their scrolls and they would hide them in some places due to security issues. The Shia at the time obviously had to hide themselves a lot of the time. So these ahadith reached us through blood, sweat and tears. It was very difficult for them to preserve the hadith, but they were preserved. These usul were preserved until we see in the latter times of the Imams. In the time of Imam al-Jawad, what happens? A companion goes towards Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. We have this narration in al-Kafi. What does he say? He says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ إِنَّ مَشَايِخَنَا رَوَوْا عَنْ أَبِي جَعْفَرٍ وَأَبِي عَبْدِ اللَّهِ وَكَانَتِ التَّقِيَّةُ شَدِيدَةً فَكَتَمُوا كُتُبُهُم. He says that our shuyukh, the scholars and the teachers that came before us, they used to narrate from Abi Ja'far and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And at that time, taqiyya was really, really harsh. So they used to actually hide their books. This is what I mentioned. The usul used to be hidden, in order for them to be preserved. وَلَمْ تُرْوَ عَنْهُمْ فَلَمَّا مَاتُوا صَارَتِ الْكُتُبُ إِلَيْنَا. So once these people passed away, our mashayikh, they left these books for us. So what should we do with these books of ahadith, of these usul of the companions that came before, and they were hidden, right? We have these books now. So what do we do with them? The Imam, what does he say? Imam al-Jawad, what does he say? He says, حَدِّثُوا بِهَا فَإِنَّهَا حَقٌّ. The Imam says, narrate from them, because what is in them is truth. Those are our ahadith. These usul of the companions, these are our ahadith. What do we get from this narration? What are the points that we understand from this narration? We see that the Imams actually made sure that they purified the books. We see that until the time of Imam al-Jawad, these usul that were preserved from the time of Imam al-Sadiq remained pure. They were purified by the Imams throughout the generations, so that even when it reached Imam al-Jawad, they were clear and they were truth and they were haqq. They were the narrations of the Imams. The Imam is saying, these are our narrations, you can narrate them. So then, what else does that do? Imam al-Jawad saying, you can narrate these traditions from us. That also ensures now that no new narrations can be added on, because now those narrations have become mashhur. Imam al-Jawad then says, these are our ahadith. All of the scholars that were there will now know these ahadith. They become mashhur and ma'aruf. So if someone was to add into them some narrations of ghulu, they would be able to pinpoint it straight away, because Imam al-Jawad was able to confirm and affirm all of these usul. And these are the very usul, these are the very books at the time of Imam Sadiq, Imam al-Baqir, that Mughira ibn Sa'id used to try and add narrations into. But look at the hard work of the companions and the Imams, such that when you reach the time of Imam al-Jawad, still they are preserved and there are no lies and kadhib and ghulu in them, as per the divine responsibility of the Imams that we read from the Quran. You see, the Imams, they actually made sure that our books do not become riddled with confusion and ghulu. It is these very usul that were used to compile our classical books. Books like Al-Kafi, books like Basair al-Darajat that we have here, books like Rijal al-Kashi, books like Kitab al-Ghayb by Shaykh al-Nu'mani. All of these books that we see, the books of Shaykh al-Saduq, they were all compiled using the usul, using these books of the companions that were preserved and written down. Does that make sense? So we see here that these usul were preserved. And that's why when we look through Al-Kafi, when we look through Basair al-Darajat, we don't see a hadith of ghulu, we don't see a hadith of disbelief and zandakha, calling the Imams Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or saying that the Sharia is abrogated. Absolutely not. We don't have any of these narrations in our books. You can see the books of the Ghulat that exist today. We can look at the classical books of the Ghulat, Al-Hidayat al-Kubra for example. You can see in them that these narrations still exist in their books. These are not the books of the Shia. These are not the books that took from the usul of the companions of the Imams. Does that make sense? So we can see here that the narrations of ghulu were completely cleansed from our books. The narrations of kufr and zandaqa were completely cleansed from our books. So these books are protected from the misguidance and the deviance of the Ghulat. Generally speaking, these classical books are all the narrations of the Imams, and they are the intended narrations that were intended to reach us. This is as per the roles of the Imam, as per the Quran, that they would ensure that books reach us that are reliable, books that we can rely on for truth. So this is where I want to end this episode and conclude with all the points that we have been able to discuss in this episode, and conclude the series with regards to ghulu, where next week we'll be moving on inshallah to a new series. So what do we find in the points where we conclude? The first point is the Imams are the protectors of the religion, and they protect this religion from ghulu, and they protect their narrations from being infiltrated by the ghulat. Number two, we find that the Imams cleaned their own books of Hadith, and they taught their companions also to do that. And we looked at multiple examples of that. And number three, what do we find? We find that the books that we have now, the classical books that we rely upon, like Al-Kafi, like Basair al-Darajat, like Kitab al-Ghayb by Shaykh al-Nu'mani, like the books of Shaykh al-Saduq, Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah, all of these books were compiled through the Usul of the companions, and these are narrations that are reliable. These are narrations that we should rely on for truth as per the responsibility of the Imams. And that is not me saying that we should just take everything that is in these books blindfolded. Not at all. We should still look at them with the principles that the Imams taught us. However, what I'm saying is that these books are completely safe from complete confusion and riddles of ghulu and stuff like that. Those are not things that we should be side-eyeing these books for. What we should be doing is learning the principles of the Imams alayhi salam and navigating the narrations in the way that they wanted us to navigate them, because the stuff that has reached us has been intended to reach us. This is not stuff that has just reached us by mistake. This is part of the responsibility of the Imams, that they give us and they make sure it reaches us that which needs to reach us. That is one of their roles as the Imams. If the Imams were those people who were not concerned about their narrations and they allowed these books to be riddled with the narrations of the Ghulat, what kind of Imams are they? What kind of guardians and protectors of the religion are they if they were not to at least put this level of protection with regards to their sayings and their ahadith as per the Quran? It's ironic that the people that you see these days going through the books of the Shi'a and saying this is ghulu, this is ghulu, this is ghulu, and they claim to be Shi'a themselves, they claim to be part of the community, and they call everything ghulu. It's ironic that those are the same people that don't accept the higher stations of the Imams. These are the same people that say that the Imams are normal people. Of course, you're going to say that the narrations are filled with the narrations of the Ghulat, because you don't even believe that the Imams are infallible. You don't believe that the Imams hold this high level of responsibility towards their Shia. You don't believe in the 12th Imam having a level of protection over his Shia. That's why this leads you towards this understanding that our books are all filled with ghulu. And that's where these people, they become heavily misguided. We've seen the narrations that the Imams put hard work into this so that these books and these ahadith could reach us in the cleanest state possible, and for that which was intended to reach us, and so that the haqq could remain apparent. So with that, I want to end this episode, and we're going to be moving on to a new series next week where we're going to be starting to speak about the maqamat of the Imams. Now that we've mentioned the explanations with regards to ghulu and what is ghulu, we want to speak about the maqamat of the Imams that are not ghulu and are found in our classical books and in the Quran. So for more content like this, make sure that you follow us on YouTube, on Instagram and on Spotify. We want to see the numbers go through the roof this year, so make sure you are following us on all of the platforms available, and I will see you again next week where we'll be starting our new series. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.